Why They Call It the Blues from Elton John. My guest was with me a few weeks ago. What was your book called, Anthony?
Is There Life After Death?
Is There Life After Death, which I ploughed into and had a long and interesting chat with Anthony about Is There Life After Death. There were many ways of. I was only arguing with somebody over the weekend about that word life after death. Whether it means life as we know it, or it just means existence.
Yeah, exactly. Well,
understand what I was arguing with somebody, and they were saying, when you die, your spirit lives on. And I say, but does your spirit know it was you? And they said, not necessarily. I said, well, you're dead then. You know, I said, unless when you pass on, you've got some knowledge of who you were and who your loved ones are and who you loved. I said, if you haven't got that, you're dead.
That's the overall problem with...
If there is a spirit there, I'm not saying there isn't. The thing that keeps us alive, the spark of life that is us, you know, if that moves on somewhere else and grows a stage, but it doesn't remember us or we don't know, we're still dead.
Because that's one of the major problems with reincarnation, isn't it? The idea that I will be reincarnated as something else, but I won't remember who I am. In which case, what is the point? Because effectively we have to grow by learning through our experiences.
I mean, if I believe in an afterlife, then unless I know that afterlife, then my belief is on false ground, because I will never know.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. You will not know who you are, and in fact there's no continuity between your old self and your future self, wherever that may be. I mean, as you know, in my books I deal with what happens just before you die, effectively. But sometimes, you know, when I do lectures and things, we do get into these areas of debate and discussion, but I always argue this is very much metaphysics and theology rather than an actual, what I would call grounded scientific fact, because it is subjective. It's bound to be. You know, you see a ghost, it's a subjective thing. Which is exactly, you know, today what we're going to be talking about with Deja Vu. You know, it's a very subjective sensation.
Now, you came up with an explanation as far as you're concerned for Deja Vu.
I did, yeah.
Because it does happen to all of us. We just didn't know what the word for it was.
Yeah, it's interesting. If you look at the statistics, I mean, there was a guy called Levin did some research in 1993, and he found that about 68% of people experienced deja vu at some time in their lives, and the balance of the people didn't know what you're talking about. It's an experience that's beyond them. But effectively what I suggest in my theory or my hypothesis is that that we are all living our lives in a three-dimensional recreation of our previous lives. So in which case, sometimes you will get a feeling of recognition because you have lived it before. You know, it's suddenly, I've been here before, I've done this before. But there is a good deal of neurological research being done on deja vu, and there's a lot of...
So this is brain-wise?
Yeah, brain-wise, to understand, could it be that there is a neurological reason? And funnily enough, in 1963, a guy called Robert Efron came up with a very, very popular idea, and that was basically that, you know, there are two hemispheres to the brain, and put simply that... the non-dominant hemisphere of your brain has seen something a split second before the dominant hemisphere has. And in effect, you subconsciously recall it because you've seen it before. That works with the eyes. Apparently, though, there's been recent research done at Leeds University by a lady called Akira O'Connor. And they have a gentleman who is profoundly blind. And effectively, he gets deja vu sensations in exactly the same way as we do with sighted people. And effectively the brain is wired that way. So effectively the whole idea that it's one part of the brain processing before another part of the brain is now out of the water. So there has to be another explanation.
So, I mean, I can say to you now, yes, it's happened to me. But I couldn't give you an example of it happening to me. It happens at the time and you think, oh, I'm sure I've said that before, done it before. And then it's gone in an instant. I mean, to me, deja vu is a fleeting moment. I mean, with some people, is deja vu longer than that?
Oh, yes. With people, there are certain people that record the fact that there was an example of a Japanese guy a few years ago who considered his whole life was a deja vu, that he considered he knew what was going to be happening to him all the time. Unfortunately, nobody really spent enough time talking to him to make out whether this was some form of delusion or it was actuality. But some people, when there's a big argument about people who suffer from a particular form of epilepsy called temporal lobe epilepsy, whereby as part of their pre-seizure aura, they get very, very profound deja vu sensations. And indeed, neurologists use deja vu as part of the diagnosis of whether somebody's got temporal lobe epilepsy or not. And these individuals report that they have deja vu sensations, that they know what's going to be happening for the next 2 or 3 minutes. And indeed, there are 1 or 2 people I know of that I've interviewed that have these sensations, and I've said to them, well, if you know what's going to happen next, why don't you just say something? Yeah. But they turned around to me and they said something really interesting, and they said, well, if I did, I'd change the future. For instance, now, Billy, if I have a deja vu now, and I have a deja vu and I know that you're going to say something different, I'll turn around to you and say, Billy, you were about to say that, which stops you saying it. Yeah. And they would argue that, that would change the future in some way.
No, but there's a way around that. You write it down.
Yeah, which there are different forms of deja vu, and there are different categories. A guy called Vernon Knepp is a psychiatrist out in Seattle in the USA, and he has expanded out the definitions of what deja vu is, because deja vu as a word means already seen. Yeah. But effectively, that's not accurate anymore. There are 3 types now. There's deja vécu, which is already lived. There's deja senti, which is already felt, and deja visite, which is already visited. And they think they're 3 very different categories. Because when you get a deja vécu sensation, it's as if you've lived that moment before. Everything, the feeling of the people around you, that every sensation you have gives you the impression that you're living something again. Whereas something like a deja visite is when somebody goes to a place and they recognise it. And not only do they recognise it, but they know
there's a few documented stories of that, isn't there? People going to places.
Yeah, the classic example of this was an American writer who went to a place called Stanton Harcourt in I think it was Oxfordshire, and he wandered around and he knew the layout of the place perfectly, and he knew what rooms and what was going to be in each rooms. And the interesting thing was he looked back on his history, and he looked back on this, and he found out that he had actually read a book on this particular place many years before, which had described the layout, and that seemed to be something to do with a phenomenon called cryptomnesia, which is kind of lost memories. It's hidden memories that you've forgotten you have.
That's an explanation used for a lot of things, isn't it?
Yes.
That,
past life recall, for instance, is another one.
It's something you've read about or something like that.
Yeah, and it's gone deep into your subconscious.
OK, let's take the travel.
BBC Radio Merseyside Travel News.
If you'd like to comment on anything Anthony said so far, give us a ring on 709 9333. Here's Marie.
Billy. Yeah. Billy, I feel like I've been here before. I'm sure I've done this before.
It must happen to you a lot, that.
Well, it blinking does over the Runcorn Widnes Bridge. I am sorry for anybody stuck in this. I did try and warn a few people last week. Major roadwork started today. The roadworks mean that it's down to a contraflow, so just the 1 lane in each direction. The Runcorn side of the bridge is closed. One side of the bridge is closed, so they're using the other 2 lanes, 2-way traffic. And I'm not joking. I've just had somebody on now saying on the Widnes side, the queues are back to the Knowsley Expressway. We don't know how far they are on the Runcorn side. If you could help us out with that. Best advice is avoid it if you can, because it is severely congested now. It was going to be like this until 3:30 today, but with it being the first day of these roadworks, the council have just phoned us up and said that they're going to go on until at least, definitely 4:30. I can tell you that this will be the case, a contraflow until 4:30, and we're going to find out how they're working these roadworks out over the rush hour period. So avoid it if you can. People are trying to avoid it by cutting through Warrington, so many of the routes in and out of Warrington and Widnes are queuing, so long delays to and from and over the bridge. And in Liverpool city centre, Leeds Street, King Edward Street, those lights are still damaged. They're out of order. The main set of lights, they are being repaired. 0151 794 0953. Marie Megan, BBC Radio Merseyside Travel.
You've seen the game, you've heard the commentary. Now it's your call.
If he's a midfielder, you'll get your 11-12 goals a season.
Our crossing is dreadful.
If he's a centre-forward, he might get your 8 goals a season.
He was in the top half and he was glued to the left-hand side there.
If he's in between, he'll get you nothing.
Join Alan Jackson for the Radio Merseyside football phone-in.
He was in the dugout 10 minutes before he was brought off, wasn't he?
We've got such a small squad, it's ridiculous.
They paid a hell of a lot of money.
I've never known a player to do less in a game.
The football phone-in. Your views, your call. BBC Radio Merseyside.
That's the nail on the head.
Love them football phone-ins. Anthony Peake is my guest. Anthony, I have an email here from a gentleman by the name of Martin. He said, can you ask Anthony about the concept of deja vu within dreams, and how this may differ from regular deja vu, if there's such a thing?
Yeah, the dream theory of deja vu, it's something that was actually put forward by a guy called Art Funkhouser, who is an American based in Switzerland. And what Art suggests is that a deja vu is really a memory of a dream you've had. In other words, in a recent time, over the last week or so or whatever, or even deeper in your past, you've had a dream. And in that dream, you have dreamt something very, very precise. And you forget the dreams, because we do forget our dreams. But effectively, you then find yourself reliving the events of your dream, and you have this subliminal recognition of the fact. A very, very powerful theory, I think, but effectively it implies precognition. Because effectively, if you have a dream whereby suddenly in the future you experience that dream, clearly it is a form of precognition.
I think a lot of people, though, will be able to associate with that view, because I said to you before, I can't remember any deja vus, though I know I've had them, but I do know definitely that there's often when I've thought I've done something or thought I've been somewhere, then I've realised, well, I've tussled within myself, did I dream about this? Or did it actually happen? And usually it's a recognition of a dream I'd had.
Yes, and it's an exceptional theory, Art's idea, and it is very much based upon the writings of a guy called J.W. Dunn, who in the 1930s wrote a series of books on the idea that we all dream precognitively, and that our dreams are mostly precognitive. And it became profoundly popular for a time. J.B. Priestley wrote a series of plays on this theory. His play Time and the Conways was very much based upon this very idea of time. And indeed, the next time I'm in 2 weeks' time, I'll be discussing time theories and how time works.
So, I've got another email here, but I don't understand why deja vu is so important. I mean, is deja vu seen by people like yourself who, obviously a lot of it's got to do with your brain, because as we know, the brain is largely unexplored. I mean, is deja vu a pathway to the future?
It could be a pathway to the future, or it could be a pathway to your own past. Because effectively, if my hypothesis is correct, in fact, it's a memory, not a precognition as such. It's a memory of a past event that you've lived in your past. In fact, the definition of deja experience, according to Vernon Neppe, is any subjectively inappropriate impression of familiarity of the present with an undefined past.
Which
that's
quite
quite
precise. To be explained.
Yes, and it is a question really of deja vu. It is so common, and people have it so regularly. It clearly is something that is very, very real. And it is whether we can explain it neurologically. Now, I would argue that I can attempt an explanation neurologically, but still will not invalidate the fact that you're still perceiving the future. Now, interestingly enough, a guy on my forum, Carl, has recently, in the last few days, been involved in a brand new survey of deja vu experiences. And indeed, he only posted it today. And this is fascinating stuff, because he's got some of the latest comments from people around the world about some amazing deja vu experiences that clearly are precognitive.
Okay, let's. You just mentioned about Dr. Art Funkhouser, and Dr. Funkhouser is on the line now. Dr. Art Funkhouser. Hello, Doctor.
Hello.
Do you still see Paul Simon?
Say that again, please.
It's an in-joke.
Oh, I see, okay.
With you being called Art Funkhouser, you see, which is not far away from Art Garfunkel. I thought I'd ask you,
that's right,
had you seen Paul Simon? Or was that deja vu? Did I imagine I said that? Welcome to the show, Dr. Funkhouser. They're phoning from Switzerland.
That's right.
And you have a theory over deja vu yourself.
Well, in my case and in my experiences, my deja vus have resulted from dreams that I had preceding the later experience.
So you remember your dreams, Doctor?
I do, as a rule, yes, and but these dreams are not remembered until they start coming true, and it's kind of a startling and baffling experience.
So, well, how do you differentiate? How do you know that what you're experiencing you did dream about?
You don't know it until it's happening, and then you say, oh, the last time I experienced this, I was in bed asleep, and I was seeing this in a dream.
So what does it mean? Does it mean anything with regards to life and death?
Well, it would be interesting if the deja vu experiences were about anything important, but usually they're very banal. You have no inkling that they're going to happen, and they're about nothing important.
No. So scientifically, that they don't mean anything.
Scientifically, they prove, or would seem to prove to me and to many others, that somehow we are able to access the future through when we're dreaming. But how we do that, we don't know. It's certainly interesting scientifically, but thus far there's no good explanation of how we're able to do this.
So scientifically, would the scientific side of it hope that someday, they might be able to induce you to dream about the future?
Yes, right. Or maybe one could even consciously access this realm. There are people who are trying to do this with what they call lucid dreaming.
But this is also pre-assuming that the future has already been lived.
Yes.
Which goes with your theory, doesn't it, Anthony?
It does.
Yes, it matches up with what Tony's saying quite nicely.
Because what Tony says is that we're all living in parallel worlds.
Yes. And please note that I'm not saying all deja vu experiences can be explained this way. This is just maybe one type of experience, one type of deja experience.
Was it because of your own experiences, Doctor, that made you start looking into this?
Absolutely, yes. Because they were completely baffling, and I found no good information about them at the time.
But the fact that it happens regularly to you is strange, isn't it?
No, they don't happen regularly. They happened when I was young, in my teens. And since then, they've happened once in a while, and they're not as intense anymore as they used to be.
Well, thank you for coming on, Doctor. It's been nice talking to you.
And with you.
Thank you very much.
Wish you a successful show.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Art.
Quite welcome.
Art Funkhouser over in Switzerland, and Becky's on the line from Bromborough. Hello, Becky.
Hello.
You're through to Anthony.
Hi, Becky.
Anthony. My husband wrote down on an envelope that my stepfather would say our daughter was reincarnated through my mother, who had died. Now, we were going on holiday a couple of days, for a few days, to see him, because she hadn't seen him since she was 3. And when we came back 4 days later, he showed me, now I'm registered blind, so he had to read to me, your dad will say that Jodie is reincarnated into your mum. Now, the only thing that's different the only thing that looks the same sometimes of Jodie is her eyes. She's got my mum's eyes. At times, it's a certain look. But that happened. That my husband said he will say this, and he did. He actually said it on the first night there.
That's fascinating, isn't it? Because what you're having here is you're having something to do with possible reincarnation, but on top of that, a precognitive statement that somebody actually said as well, which was written down. Now, that's exactly the kind of thing I'm very keen to monitor, because many times you'll have is somebody will have a precognition, and of course they won't tell anybody, or it will only be told after the event.
I'm always getting that.
All right. Now, what I'm keen to do, and I have a very active forum, AnthonyPeake.com, where we're collecting these kind of things, because it's profoundly important that if we can find absolute evidence that somebody did see something before it happened, it is clear that time, as we perceive it, it's not as time really is.
I don't see. I say things are going to happen, and they do.
Yeah, which is amazing in itself, isn't it? Do you know? Does it just come out automatically?
Yes.
It just spontaneously happens.
Yeah.
Because that's fascinating in itself. So it's as if there's a part of you knows the future that's speaking through you.
Yeah.
Almost.
Yeah. I get it all the time, and 99.9% it will happen. I'll say, oh, this is going to happen, or somebody will say this, and 99% of the time it does. And it is so weird. And my husband is exactly the same. He'll say, I've had that before.
Interesting. That's fascinating.
It's interesting, the fact that she has this, what you call it, skill, gift, or what, and yet it was a husband.
Yes.
Who's actually made this this prediction.
It's clearly as if they're bouncing off each other in terms of these abilities, because effectively if somebody is partially sighted or blind, you tend to find that other senses will develop and become more acute. And clearly, in your case, it seems to be the case there as well. Now, funnily enough, you might be interested to know, if you have the opportunity, I'm talking at Liverpool at Prescott Library on next Monday, and I'm lecturing at Liverpool Central Library on the 25th of November.
Yeah.
And it would be delighted if you could get along. In fact, I only live down the road from you in Spittal, so I'm quite close to you anyway. But it would be delightful if you get along to either of those.
I shall ask my husband, what's your website address, and then I can get in touch.
Okay,
it's
get in touch with you. Okay, it's www.anthonypeake.com. That's Anthony with an H, and it's Peake. And on there we have a really active forum as well, where lots of people from around the world, like Dr. Funkhouser that's just been on, he's on there, and everybody. Quite interesting stuff. And I'd be delighted for you to join us on there as well.
Right.
Thanks very much, Becky.
Okay.
Thanks, Becky.
Thank you, my love.
Bye.
And just one more question by email, Anthony, of Pedram Manson. He says, are deja vus only accidentally, or is it possible to see deja vus with one's own will by powers of the mind?
Fascinating question, Pedram. Now, what I would say with this, if you have read my second book, The Daemon, A Guide to Your Extraordinary Secret Self, what I suggest is that many deja vu experiences are actually caused by your own higher self, as if it's trying to warn you. And one of the things I'll be discussing in future programmes will be techniques whereby we can probably open up the communication channels from our lower self, our everyday self, to our higher self. Because if we have lived this life again, effectively our daemon, our higher self, has the memories and it knows the facts before they happen. So it will warn you in certain times. Like, sometimes you get the feeling you should or shouldn't do something. So, no, that's a very, very perceptive question. Thank you.
Okay, so the site again is www.anthonypeake.com. Anthony's at Prescott Library next Monday. What time's Anthony?
That will be at 11 a.m.
Okay, 11 a.m. at Prescott. He's back with us in 2 weeks' time, and then he's at the Liverpool Hornby Library on the 25th of November. You'd be interested in this movie then, won't you? Men Who Stared at Goats.
Yes, absolutely. This is to do with distance viewing and being able to influence people by power of thought.
And this is a documented experiment, isn't it?
It is,
did happen in World War II.
Oh, very much. And right the way through in the 1950s and 1960s, this work was done in America. Now, funnily enough, I'll be in London in February doing a weekend sort of, I suppose, a workshop, for want of a better term, with people who astral travel and such like as well. And I'm fascinated to see if we can find any absolute proof of this.
Because these are soldiers who were getting trained to kill by staring, aren't they?
Correct, yeah. And the book is, if you get the opportunity to read the book, it's great fun. But underneath it clearly proves that the Americans at one stage were very, very interested in this type of work. And they clearly believed that particularly distance viewing was something that was useful, because effectively people could project their minds into other places and be spies.
Okay, thank you, Anthony. Very interesting. Anthony back with us in 2 weeks' time. Any idea what's going to happen at the match tonight against Birmingham?
No idea. But there's bound to be somebody out there that will.
Thanks a lot, Anthony.
Okay, thank you.
Here's a man who